As students, ProfGlobe, we are now in week 4. We bring up the week 4 lecture slides and we can get started. All right. I'm going to place these in reading view versus presentation view because that kind of crazy on my screen. So hopefully everybody can see this okay. And we're going to just jump right into it. So the topics for week 4 are networking basics, cyber attack basics, threat event analysis, and we're going to introduce laws and regulations. Really won't go into it this much this week, but just kind of introduce the topic. So let me double check my volume. Turn that up a little bit. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay, and put that on 70. All right. So starting with networking protocols, this topic is really important. It's a foundation topic that really helps you begin to understand where vulnerabilities come from and how threat actors exploit them. A lot of it begins with just understanding the networking basics, understanding how devices or endpoints, you can use those words interchangeably, communicate and share information over a public network like the internet. And so when you hear me say the word the internet, you please replace that with a public network, not a private network, which means if the public network probably more likely than not does not have any security features involved. And so that means you need to implement your own security features prior to sharing information with another device over that public network. So let's get started. Networking protocols provide the rules needed for computers to communicate. It's important to know that we're going to use words like devices, computers, hosts, and endpoints. They're going to be used interchangeably when it comes to networking and networking devices. So the rules would be how data is formatted, the sequence or order that data is shared and transmitted. That's all defined by the networking protocols. There are two foundation networking protocols used over public networks. One is the transmission control protocol slash internet protocol, TCP/IP. Another one is UDP, which is kind of coming up here um, shortly on another slide. Other protocols includes things like HTTP and SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, which we'll talk about here shortly. This section includes information on common protocols that you'll need to understand if you want to get a cybersecurity certification like Security Plus. TCP IP is also known as the protocol suite. And that suite is made up of connectivity protocols, internet protocols, transport, application, and encryption protocols. This diagram, you definitely need to understand and know the different layers of the TCP/IP protocol stack. One layer being the application layer that contains HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, SMTP, Simple Mail, DNS, Domain Naming System, NFS, Network File Share. That's what allows you to share folders across operating systems and across devices using NFS. So those are application protocols. Your transport protocols are TCP and UDP, Unicast datagram protocol, and TCP we already went over. Then you get over the internet, which is kind of like your public network. How if we're all going to be on this public network, what rules do we go by? That's your internet stack right there. And IP and ICMP is your kind of control and administrative protocol suite, how you can exchange status information, keys, and things like that through ICMP and IGMP. And then you get into your physical hardware rules and interfaces, and you have protocols for that, ARP and RARP, and then your physical layer. Okay, so each host, each physical building or lab or classroom has one or more devices in it, and each device must have a unique IP address. So IP addresses are composed of a class plus a network ID, which is the kind of like a physical organization ID, and your host ID, the actual device or endpoint ID. Um, IP addresses are represented by dotted decimal notation, which you probably have seen, 149.169.175.207. The last octet is the actual unique address for that endpoint or device. And then you can kind of walk your way backwards to understand then what's the net ID and what's the class ID. IP classes range from class A to class E. Most networks use class C, which is a 8-bit host ID, which means you can have upwards of 256 unique physical machines or devices or endpoints on a network with a unique address. There is the concept of IPv4 and IPv6, which we'll go into a little bit later. And then also there's the concept of subnetting. And basically, your classes tells you what's your range of unique addresses that you can then assign a device. That's what your class tells you. Within that range, so within the class C, you can have 256. Out of that 256, you can subnet them or subdivide them into smaller ranges. So, 0 to 25, 26 to 45, that type of thing. You can then divide them into even smaller ranges and then assign them to a department or a team, a physical site, however you want to group them. You can then assign them, and then you can apply different rules, or you can have some protocols be allowed to a subnet and some be denied, which then brings in further security. So the concept is segmenting your network, and that's really a really important concept to further secure a network environment. Now take a few minutes and click on the link here and get some more details on networking basic to kind of help shore up your foundation knowledge on networking basics. We talk about services and protocols here. And some of the information covered in the video, I will be talking about in upcoming slides. Okay, so imagining a world with just Class C networks and a subnet mask, which basically says use that last octet for my unique numbers and everything else will remain the same. So 192.168.1, it represents your 255, 255, 255. So those things remain the same. And then we're going to change that last octet to assign a unique address to each endpoint of physical device on the network. And this slide just goes into more details to give you some examples of how to do subnetting. So just make sure you understand subnetting. Another way to denote in shorthand what the range of unique IP addresses on a network is through a CIDR notation. So instead of writing out that subnet mask that you saw earlier, that 255, 255, 255, you can use a CIDR notation to do that. And looking at this third bullet, it has 24. You may write that out in 32-bit binary, which would include the 111.111. You see that example there, but if you go down to the next, this put it down here. So 192.168.101 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. You can then say, well, my CIDR notation really is 192.168.100.1/24. And that in of itself says, hey, we have a range of 256 unique addresses that we can apply to this. You just need to know what a CIDR range is. I won't ask you to write out what a CIDR is representative wise from a subnet mask. So you don't have to do that. I think that's for the networking class. But just you need to understand that CIDR is a shorthand for the subnet mask to indicate the range of IP addresses available on a network. This goes into IPv6. IPv6 supports significantly larger address spaces over IPv4. You can see up to 340 IP addresses were available versus 356. IPv6 uses 128-bit IP address range versus 32-bit that you saw on your IPv4. Just quite a bit more space. And then just talks a little bit about the formatting in a 128-bit world IPv6. A lot of networks have both version 4 address mapping turned on and version 6. You can't mix it on a actual physical machine. You have to choose one over the other. But potentially, if you're savvy in your networking, you can have some subnets that are IPv6 and some that uses IPv4 as is mapping. Now getting into application protocols, this just talks about, and I'm looking up, sorry, because my monitor is right there, even though the camera is right here. So let me be a little bit more conscious of that. Your application protocols operate at the application layer of a TCP IP protocol stack as defined by the Open Systems Interconnect, OSI, reference model. The following list identifies some or more of the commonly known application protocols like HTTP, HTTPS. HTTPS basically has encryption built in. The standard used to be SSL, secure socket layer encryption, but now this transport layer security is now the standard. As you can see here, reading here that HTTP data is encrypted over the default port, which is 443. Remember that. Another file application um, protocol is file transfer protocol. I think it's considered a legacy one because it does not encrypt the data. That means the data is in the clear and can be intercepted and stolen by a threat actor, and its default port is port 20. Here's some other ones. I won't read through them all. Put these to memory, like a simple network management protocol, which is an administrative protocol for managing devices on your network. LDAP, another popular one for account management, user account management. Kerberos for security and key exchange is becoming even more popular these days. Microsoft SQL, Remote Desk Protocol, another very popular one for remote administration. And as you can see here, its default port is 3389, which is above the default port list. Some encryption protocols include Secure Shell, which helps you secure things like file transfer protocol and connection protocols and secure copy type protocols. SSL is kind of phasing out, but it helps you secure all other types of protocols like HTTP, LDAP, and others. TLS has much more stronger encryption. and it runs on, by default, port 636. IPsec is a very popular tool protocol suite with some additional protocols that allow you to create a tunnel over a public network called a virtual private network, and that's where you get your VPN from IPsec. IPsec is made up of two main components, an authentication header and a encapsulating security payload, which also allows you to do secure key exchange. So in the public-private key exchange, get in that public key so you can encrypt messages and the private key so you can decrypt the message. That exchange and of that public key will be secure using IPsec. And this just gives you an example of another really key protocol used every day, all the time, and when we're online, and that's your domain name system, your DNS records. It is basically your big map between an IP address, a unique IP address on a physical machine, and the name, the outward facing name of a server. So a web server could be www.facebook.com. All you need to know is www.facebook.com. That actually maps to your unique IP address for the web server hosting or web servers hosting facebook.com. But you don't need to know all of those different server unique IP addresses. You just need to know the domain name, and DNS allows you to do that. DNS is a pretty robust system. It is made up of these core records. Your quad A record, which holds the host name. It can hold both the host name as a IPv6 name or IPv4 name. A PTR record, which is a pointer record into the DNS that allows quick lookup. MX record, which allows for forwarding of mail to a trusted server. A canonical name, which is your certified name, is like your birth name. If you don't define these records, then threat actors know what these records are used for, and they can poison your DNS server, basically take it over and forward traffic to their malicious site without you even knowing. If you're not aware that you need to set these records and monitor these types of records. So understanding DNS is really important because it is foundational to communicating over a public network or the internet. Again, this just goes over ports. You need to make sure you understand the concept of ports. We have both TCP and UDP ports on any computer running an operating system that talks TCP IP, which is basically all things connected to the internet. Then that computer through that operating system can have upwards of 65,536 TCP ports or applications or services running at the same time, and the same for UDP ports. What the administrator job is you see this third bullet here, is the administrator's job is to open up these ports on firewalls and routers to allow or deny that associated protocol listening on that port to operate. So firewall rules allow and deny communications through ports. And protocols listen on port. So HTTP listens on port 80, HTTPS, as we saw before, 443, and all the well-known ports are between 0 and 1023, as you see there. And then you have registered ports and then private ports that go all the way up to 65,535. Again, you can have any protocol run on any of these ports, but the device you're talking to need to know that's how they get a hold of you. What they need to know what protocol you're using and what port to send the requests and the responses to. All right, put this to memory. These are all of your kind of known or popular protocols and the ports that they run on. You will get questions on these. All right, that's your basics. Hope you watched that video. It's a really good video there over networking basics, and hopefully this information was useful. Help to give you a foundation on understanding networking services, the TCP/IP protocols stack, the layers of it, the basic layers of it, and how communication work over the internet, and how devices are uniquely identified so you can communicate to them over a public network. They must have a unique IP address. Now turn into cyber attacks. Let's go over the basics. All right, so malicious software, also known as malware and social engineering, are two common threats that any organization will face, especially if they have computers connected to a public network. So malware includes a wide range of software that has malicious intent. Malware is not software that you would knowingly purchase or download. Um, so usually a threat actor has installed it onto your system without your knowledge in order to carry out or conduct some malicious activity. So take a few minutes and click the link, and it's a video of some top um, cyber attacks to kind of familiarize you with the concept of cyber attacks and malware and what can happen to an infected system. Just given a definition, a virus is a set of malicious code that attaches itself to a host. Remember, we talked about host slash device slash endpoint, use those words interchangeably. A host application must be executed to run the malicious code, or must be turned on to run a malicious code. When the host application is executed, the virus tries to replicate by finding other hosts in infection. Not all viruses do that, but there are a certain class or types of viruses that just tries to propagate itself throughout a company's network on all the machines. And not just a company, it could be a home network also, or entire the public internet. It'll propagate itself to wherever it can get to. Polymorphic malware. Some virus developers use polymorphism as a method to arm and propagate malware on a organization's network. Polymorphic malware has the ability to morph or mutate when it replicates itself by changing its parameters, maybe its name, the folder that it stores itself in when it executes, so it'll be harder to detect. An example of a type of malware that's self-replicating is a worm. A worm is a self-replicating malware that travels throughout a network without an assistant of a host application or a user doing anything. It is engineered to basically replicate itself, whatever it gains access to the compromised credential that it's using to run and carry out the malicious activity. One of the significant problems caused by worms is that they consume network bandwidth. Worms can replicate themselves hundreds of times, basically eating up processor speed, storage space, and memory on host or infected devices. Each infected device tries to locate and affect other systems on the network, and which can degrade the overall performance of that network. Other types of basic attacks include logic bombs, which is a string of code embedded into an application or a script that will execute at the response of an event. A backdoor provides another way of accessing a system, and similar on how a backdoor is a house can provide another method of entry. Malware such as Trojans and often install backdoors in systems with bypassing normal authentication methods, and it's a pretty common tactic. Then you have Trojans themselves, also called a Trojan horse, which looks like something beneficial, but is actually something more malicious. Trojans frequently create backdoors, allowing criminals to connect to systems remotely after they have been infected. Other Trojan methods that has become popular in recent years and that includes rogueware and scareware, um, advertisement or advertisement malware. Rogueware masquerades itself as free antivirus software. When a user visits a site, they say, "Oh, this looks like some pretty robust antivirus software." Once it downloads itself, on the surface, it looks like it's scanning your machine and detecting viruses, but it's actually installing more malware onto your computer. Users are encouraged to download this type of software. A Trojan appears to be something useful, but includes malicious code. Botnets, you may have heard of that. Similar concept to what malware and self-replicating worm malware does, but the objective of botnets are to find more compute processor speed. So it's going out looking for machines that it can infect. And once it affects a machine, its goal is to use the CPU cycles that you have available or cores to then carry out further attacks. And so it could sit, a botnet could install malware that just sits there for a while. And then when based on commands, remote commands, it'll then execute one or more attacks, maybe not on that network, but on other networks. So that's a botnet attack. And computers in a botnet are called zombies, and they will do the bidding of whoever is controlling that botnet. Most computers join a botnet through a malware infection of some sort, which could start with a phishing email. And this is more on botnets and more definitions. Make sure you know these definitions. I'm not going to read them all. Then you get into things that are, like ransomware. Ransomware is a specific type of Trojan attack. Ransomware is a type of malware that takes control of a user's system and data. Criminals then attempt to extort payment from the victim. Ransomware often includes threats of damaging a victim or organization's data, not ever being able to get it back. And if they don't have good backups that they've tested, where they've done maybe backups on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, then they may have to be forced to pay the ransom because they know their backups are not good. And sometimes they do have good backups, but the backups are maintained on the network, which just was infected, and therefore the backups are encrypted. So it's always important to have the backups located off-site, not connected to the network computers. And here's where, good old school techniques like backup tapes, portable hard drives that you can then connect to the network to do the backups are really important. Or nowadays, cloud service providers can be your offsite, be your backup service and offsite storage for your backups. Make sure you understand the ransomware and the process of ransomware and how data how a ransomware attack is carried out. This just gives you some more examples of different types of attacks. I'm not going to read them all, but crypto locker is another one that doesn't try to trick the user, but instead is a basic kidnapping and use ransomware tactics, similar to a standard ransomware attack like WannaCry. A rootkit, make sure you understand what is a rootkit. A rootkit is a group of programs um, that hides themselves in order to carry out various attacks. But a rootkit is a basically a folder. It could be a zip file or archive of different types of malware along with other software and data files needed to carry out attacks. So that's your rootkit there. You can Google rootkits. There's some you can download and play and kind of better understand, but do it in a secure way. Download it to your virtual machine, not your regular computer. Um, and when you're in your virtual machine, once you get it downloaded, you can disable the internet on your virtual machine and not your laptop. to then play around with the rootkit or even play around with malware. So you can use your virtual machine as a kind of like safe place to discover. Just when you're done discovering, delete the malware, and you can blow away the whole virtual machine and recreate it again, and then re-enable the internet so you can then communicate onto the public network. So make sure you understand what a rootkit is. Here's some more definitions. I need you to make sure you understand what is adware. Adware is started as spyware, but then it became more of a marketing thing where adware really was looking at your cookies and browser history and then going out and popping up advertisement related to where you were going out on the internet. So adware has mostly become non-malicious, but you can't really rely on that definition. It's not think it can't be malicious, but you had adware. Adware and spam are closely related, by the way. You have social engineering attacks, which are, where you get someone to click on a link through an email. There's other types of social engineering attacks. Some other methods includes um, regular flattery and conning. You can do that either verbally or through emails, encouraging people that they've won something and they haven't. Encouraging someone to perform a risky action, encouraging someone to reveal sensitive information, like type this in or log into your bank account or your company's account in order to get a discount. Another form of social engineering is tailgating, closely following someone into a secure area where the person who's doing the tailgating doesn't actually have the PIN code or access to that area. Just again, some more examples of social engineering. Just continue to read up through those. Shoulder surfing is another one. Simply looking over someone's shoulder to try to get their PIN code, again, is another form of social engineering. Dumpster diving, maybe not as popular, but at the beginning of a semester, lots of things are being thrown out, paper with potentially sensitive information like transcripts and things like that, that cyber threat actors or people want to carry out these types of attacks. They go and they are looking through trash to find sensitive information that they can use to then either do identity impersonations or try to gain access to accounts, or potentially someone wrote down passwords. Talked about spam, unwanted, unsolicited email. Here's a good definition of this. Make sure you know that. Understand the definition of what is spam. And the key part of spam is the intent is not malicious. It's more on the annoying spectrum than on the malicious spectrum. Then you have phishing, which is the practice of sending email to users with the purpose of tricking them into revealing personal information. Make sure you know that definition. Spear phishing, know the difference? Spear phishing is targeted form of phishing. Instead of sending an email out to everyone indiscriminately, you actually target specific people or groups of people. That is what you call spear phishing. A spear phishing attack targets specific groups of users. If it could target employees within a company, like senior executives or everyone in the contracts department, then that's what a spear phishing email does, with the same goal of trying to get someone to reveal sensitive information. Whaling is a form of spear phishing that attempts to target high-level executives, like in a Las Vegas casino or big spenders, et cetera, or even in the federal government. For discussion, this will be in a new discussion thread. We'll get started this week, and we'll be talking about malware and phishing attacks and which one is the most effective. And so what are some common software used to detect and block malware? How does software detect and block malware? Who is responsible in the organization to review malware detections? Who do y'all think is responsible? Is it the CEO, CISO, CIO? Well, we're going to talk about it this week in the discussion forum. Threat event analysis. Okay, our next topic. So cybersecurity analysts are responsible for protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information within an organization. Filling this responsibility requires a commitment to a defense in depth approach, which we talked about in our foundational concepts in week 1. And that includes a multi-layer defense approach, in addition to security awareness training, following a framework if you have inexperienced employees, making sure you have multi-factor authentication enabled. It also requires analysts to have a strong understanding of the threat environment facing them and have a technical understanding of computers, networking, et cetera, in order to um, carry out a investigation. So threat event analysis, um, in order to perform that and know what you're looking for, you know, if there was a confidentiality issue, an integrity issue, or an availability, you need to know what these definitions are. These definitions we went over in week 1, in your week 1 lecture and week 1 materials. Confidentiality ensures that unauthorized individuals are not able to gain access to sensitive information. This is a key important thing for cybersecurity, and the things and the types of technology that helps you carry that out, or security controls, including firewalls, access controllers, data encryption, endpoint detection and response, intrusion detection system, all these things, data loss prevention systems. These things help you assure sensitive data remains confidential. Integrity ensures that there are no unauthorized modification to information or systems. And again, understanding from a professional what systems help you do that. Data encryption is one of the key things that definitely help you, but multi-factor authentication and role-based access control are key things that help you assure data integrity. But technologies also like data loss prevention helps. This goes more into, you know, what availability assures and in the role of the cybersecurity analyst in assessing risk for confidentiality. So threat event detection happens with signatures or user entity behavior analysis through machine learning. Threat event analysis steps includes a threat event alert trigger is sent to a SOC for further analysis. So what is monitoring then before you can even get a trigger? Things that monitor are cyber defense technologies like intrusion detection systems, network defense systems, your firewall now when someone tries to gain access, monitoring and your server log files, and when a malicious activity like multiple missed passwords are reached, an alert is sent. Intrusion detection and response, and antivirus software. All these things can send triggers to a security operations center analyst where they can then take that threat alert and start an investigation. Um, it could be that any type of attack, it could be a malware attack, a network attack, insider threat, stolen credentials through a phishing email attack. All of that could be part of the root cause of why you got the alert in the first place. Um, what a SOC analyst do is they would then say, based on potential indicators of compromise, things they're seeing on the system, maybe files that have been created, a IP address or email, they check open sources like Shodan and VirusTotal, and they will tell you the reputation of a domain or an IP address. If an IP address or name or types of file or file name has been associated with malicious malicious activity or used in malware, that's what these sites will tell a SOC analyst. SOC analyst then makes a determination. No, this is normal activity, false positive, or it confirms that it's actually malicious and then decides the severity. Is it informational, warning, critical, or an emergency? Something needs to happen ASAP, like ransomware, and it's starting to encrypt data right now. SOC analyst documents that event and then communicates it as needed or escalates it to the customer or stakeholders so action can be approved and taken. Know these steps. Risk is also associated with that. That goes into the determination of the severity, the vulnerability that's associated with it, the attacks that are being used, the type of malware. So what is risk? Risk is a threat incident time, the vulnerability, which will tell you the potential magnitude. So, a threat incident could be ransomware. The vulnerability could be that um, the user credentials that were compromised is a network administrator and it has access to all folders and all machines on multiple sites. And that would make the risk huge. Again, laws and regulations, we're just kind of introducing the topic here, last topic for this session. But laws and regulations are important for security professionals because they determine how information systems need to be governed and what resources, where you need to put your resources. So if your industry you're working in is bounded by controls and regulations like banking, financial systems, and medical, where you must keep data sensitive, you want to spend your resources and have skilled labor to make sure that the data is protected and CIA is in place. This just goes into some types of laws and regulations, but at the federal level. One known one there is a common regulation is your European Union's protection derivative and general data protection regulation GDPR, which covers the requirement to protect individuals' personal identifiable information or PII. Compliance with laws and regulations are a big deal. Can get up to 15 years in jail if you're not compliant in certain industries. Industry compliant with regulations which are not mandated by law, but which can be nonetheless have severe impact upon your ability to do business in a industry is equally important than fines and regulations because it goes to brand trustworthiness. And if your customers think that you're not trustworthy and not protecting their confidentiality, you could lose their business. So brand awareness and brand trustworthiness is just equally important as fines associated with regulations. Here is a list of laws and regulations that you need to be aware of. You may get questions on these, so definitely be aware, especially with those related to your child, Internet Protection Act, anything related to financial industry or banking industry. There's a few more. These come from your book. HAVA, which is your Voting Rights Act, protecting protecting the privacy of your vote. And this just talks about privacy, and that's it. It's quite a few topics there on week 4. Let me stop sharing, and I'm gonna pause the recording again. Quite a bit, but make sure you watch the videos, click on the links, understand the networking basics, and look at those top malware to get a good understanding of malware and types of attacks that are being carried out. And I'll see you on the next video, week 5.